Thank you, Tim. Thank you for that the kind introduction. What I want to do over the next 50, 60 minutes or so is to give you a satellite view of the work that's been taking place in Ireland over the past 20 years. And essentially, I want to kind of show you the amount of impact that development works can have, in terms of positive impact that development works can have on developing and increasing our understanding and enhancing our understanding of the past. By virtue of the range of topics, it's going to be quite a rapid run through. So we expect to start in about 12,000 years ago, pre-settlement of the island, and we're going to end up about 150 years ago. So that's the sort of range, sorry, actually about 80 years ago. So that's the range to cover. By way of background, I just thought I'd put up a slide of the sort of typical archaeology of Ireland that we have. These are some of the highlight sites. We've got 2 World Heritage Areas, including Skellig Michael there, which is currently in the Star Wars films. It's also along with Brunabony and Newgrange is the other World Heritage Site. We've also got another 150,000 archaeological sites on our Record Monuments and Places, our SMR, so to speak, and about 15,000 on our Record Protected Structures. So we've got a vast range of known and of standing monuments dating back from the Mesolithic period, when the island was first settled, although we'll speak about that a little later on, right up to the industrial archaeology as represented in the far slide from the Copper Coast in County Waterford. But my concern is not really with the upstanding archaeology. We generally try to avoid upstanding archaeology wherever possible. Our concern is with the unknown archaeology that we encounter. Just a few headlines for you in terms of the TII's work. We do our work really for 3 basic reasons. 1, legislation, it's the law. We have to address archaeology, it's mandatory. Secondly, risk. If we don't address archaeology properly and don't deal with archaeology properly, we can expose the taxpayer to considerable expenditure and considerable delay. And then thirdly, public trust. There's no point us doing a huge amount of work and spending a huge amount of money but not making that work available, or not making sure that we've actually got quality work as well. In terms of the amount of roads Tim just alluded to, the area highlighted in blue shows about 1,300 kilometres, 1,400 kilometres of new road that's been graded. That's predominantly motorway, but also national primary network, high quality dual carriageways. In addition, in total we've got about 5,000 kilometres of national road in the country, so that kind of gives you a sense of the amount of work we have to do. We're also concerned about 35 kilometres of light rail within Dublin, and that work is also underway. In terms of archaeology, that slide there shows all the archaeological excavations that we've carried out. About 2,500 archaeological excavations have been carried out in the past 20 years, and those cover are across the country. And that slide represents the work of tens of companies. Hundreds and up to thousands of archaeologists have been working on the scheme. In 2007, we had about 1,200, 1,300 archaeologists working in the country during 2007. Lots of specialists, lots of consultants. There's a huge amount of people. And I should say at the outset, what I'm talking about, I actually excavated none of these sites. None of this is my work at all. This is the work of hundreds of other people. And it's important to recognise that. That's my, shall we say, trump card and my get out of jail card. A couple of key dates, though, I've put up there in terms of 2000 in Code of Practice. The Code of Practice set up the terms of engagement, the rules of engagement between the National Roads Authority as was and the relevant department. And I won't go into the detail of it, but I think it was an important step in us actually taking on responsible management of archaeology, because it meant that the developer, the National Roads Authority, subsequent RPA and subsequent ourselves and TII, had to take account of archaeology from the outset. Another key development I'll just point out is 2004, the National Monuments Act. Up to 2004, the responsibility for delivery of archaeological reports in the main fell onto the shoulders of the actual archaeological directors themselves. Now, for multi-million euro projects, that's actually, to my mind, an intolerable burden. Now it falls under the shoulders of the roads authorities, but also means that, which are essentially county managers, if they chief executives of local authorities. So if the works aren't done, they can be held to account It's far easier to hold a county manager to account than it is to hold a jobbing archaeologist to account. And I think that's a crucial development. Just to give you a sense of, those in red, for anybody who's actually looking at work in Ireland at the moment, those are just areas that we're working currently today and last year. So we've still got a wide spread, and those red dots represent projects of minor realignments to 30, 40, 50 kilometre schemes. Kind of work that we're involved in, you can the big tunnel project you'd expect, also the motorway project and the light rail project, you'll expect us to be involved in those, but we're also involved in things such as the National Cycleway, and we bring our philosophies and our approaches to bear in the National Cycleway. We're also involved in national primary roads which go through historic towns. So that's a Buttevant down in County Cork, and we've been responsible for dealing with the archaeology there. So we've got a huge area of responsibility for archaeology. Our generalised philosophy is we're given a mission: build a road, identify a problem, solve a problem essentially. We take into account LiDAR, we take into account the archaeogeophysical surveys, we do mass amount of background research, historical mapping, field walking, etc. We do mass amount of test trenching. We will test up to 12.5–15% of a scheme in advance of construction, identify the sites, excavate them as you expect, do our post-excavation, create our archive reports, then those will carry on to do our publications. Some of you who came into the room earlier on will have heard some people talking about, there are a series of stories playing. That's one of our audiobooks that we have as fictional accounts of archaeology from Donegal. And we produce audiobooks, we do archaeological reconstructions. We do a lot of different work in terms of trying to interpret the past, and we'd see that as a key element of the end product of the end product of these projects. Equally, it's important that we actually take the information we find in our archive reports and feed it back into our future development. So we're continually learning, continually trying to take on board what we know and feed it into the future. So that's the end of the corporate spiel. Moving forward into our little tour. Now, I suppose a class is a little bit like a Spotify playlist. I've taken 2,500 archaeological sites, and I've tried to pick the ones that interest me, that excite me, and I hope excite you. And I'd say that if any of my other colleagues were standing here, they might choose one or two to be the same, but they might also choose different stories. And that's something about any of these works, that there's multiple stories, there's multiple narratives, there's multiple journeys that you can take through the past. So I'm going to start pre-settlement. As I said, it's accepted that archaeology in Ireland started in the Mesolithic period. However, there are interesting work come from non-NRA, work by Marion O'Dowd and Ruth Carden, that's suggesting that we've actually got Pleistocene settlement. Also, Richard Jennings in Cambridge is suggesting that it's a Pleistocene settlement. We haven't found any evidence of it as of yet in our schemes. What we have found are things such as our friend here, the Great Irish Deer. These are antlers from works in County Meath. Antlers have turned up in, and evidence from Pleistocene animals have turned up in Limerick, Cork, Clare, and a variety of other counties. And they're just fantastic objects. They're not archaeological, but they have actually ended up in Kells County Museum. So if you ever over there, you can have a look at them. We'll go on to archaeology proper now, the Mesolithic. And in the Mesolithic, we don't have Mesolithic houses, unlike, say, schemes in the Isle of Man and also schemes in northern England and Scotland, which have revealed Mesolithic settlement. We haven't actually found any Mesolithic settlement. We found pits, we found lithic scatters, we found more ephemeral piece of work. However, one site which we have found came up in Clownstown, and it presented itself as this fairly nondescript, and I'm going to use the word nondescript a couple of times tonight, nondescript hump and bump in a field where our road is going through it. It was immediately identified as a Fulloch Fia, which we'll talk on in more detail later on. That's a Bronze Age site. You can see in the right-hand slide, the mound's been cut through, sectioned, and you've got the upper part of the mound is Bronze Age. Underneath that, there's Neolithic layers, and as they cut away, removed the peat, they came down onto basketry. And that's on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, they excavated around that, and they revealed these two fish traps, and they're on a lake shore, or they're on an area that was previously a lake, and you can see the white from the marl. That was a lake bed. It was block lifted, and it was excavated and cleaned out, and in it they found lithics, they found hazelnut shells, they found a small wooden object which looked like a little boat, and they also block lifted it and removed it to the lab for excavation. I should say actually what I want to do is tease out connections between Ireland and England. And one feature of the work that we've done in Ireland over the past 20 years has been the number of English and British archaeologists who have been working here. So Matt Mossop, who excavated this site, is an English archaeologist, and the material here was actually conserved in the Liverpool Conservation Technologies, the lab there. Fully excavated, and when we look at it, it's reconstructed by J.G. O'Donoghue here. It's got it's a fish basket, and these fish baskets you'll find all over the world. They're conical baskets. You place it in the river, place it in the lake, you channel the fish into them through just weirs or fence posts, channel it in, you can lift the fish out, they can swim in, they can't swim out, and you can catch your fish that way. And we've got examples all over the world. They're a very common response to a common problem. This particular one, I say, is one of the earliest found in Ireland so far. It's actually currently on display in the National Museum, and also has been memorialised just recently by An Post, our Royal Mail, as a stamp. They've got recently, in the past 3 weeks, they released a series of their top 100 objects, and that one went in as the first one. So we're particularly proud of that. Just another thing I'll just point out about the slides I've got tonight. In the bottom you'll see the name of the director, the townland, the actual excavation report, and the references. Just in case anybody wants to focus in on something, you can do that, and the slides I'll make available as well if anybody wants it. Right, moving to the Neolithic period. We've got, in contrast to the Mesolithic, the Neolithic period, we've got much more archaeology. We've got more settlement, ceremonial, ritual, and we'll just take you through some of that. Firstly, we've got settlement evidence. We've got a couple of sites here from town parks and also Manani, and I've also got pottery. Now, the pottery, I'll just tease out, we're going to return to pottery again and again through the talk. The pottery here was analysed by Jessica Smith and Richard Evershed as part of their shared project, and that identified a lithic analysis on a range of pottery, and we were able to contribute quite a bit of it from various sites that we've been involved in excavating, and they were able to do live analysis which revealed that dairying had come in from the earliest part of Neolithic, so that you've got a dairying economy, and that has helped us build up our understanding past. And here's a reconstruction by Denteach Tyler of the town parks site. So you've got your house, rectangular house, you've got a bar or a barn, you've a byre or a barn, you've also got some small rectangular fields enclosed, your cattle and other domestic works taking place, and that was done between Yvonne Whitty and Dan working together. Another side that we'll deal with is a side which has actually featured here in the Royal Archaeological Institute is Maharaboy, and I know there is a debate here between Alison Sheridan and Alistair Whittle. I'm not going to take sides in the debate, but obviously I prefer an earlier date to a later date. One thing about it is that we have actually found in other road schemes in Sligo other dates that are coming in which are suggestive of an earlier date, and it's mentioned that we'll be a learning organisation, and one thing that we do over the years, we look at the work that's been done, and with our sites that are now being excavated, we tend to take out more, we'd be looking for a far greater number of radiocarbon dates than we would have done previously. So if we were to excavate Maharaboy again, we'd probably be able to answer the question with more certainty. Another thing about it, so that's the causeway enclosure there, and I should say it's for anyone who isn't familiar with Maharaboy, there's only 2 causeway enclosures in Ireland, and this is one of them that came up. So it is, regards to it, still a significant discovery. We also had, again, when we go back and look at our work, we commissioned James Bonsall and the University of Bradford to review all of our archaeological geophysical work that took place in the 2000s. And as part of that work, James went back to Maharaboy and carried out work outside the land take, just in this area here. And he identified just a plot here, and he identified this little structure down here, a 4-post structure. So it would actually be sitting there, if you know what I mean. And again, it's something that we would actually spend quite a bit of time doing. We can't step outside the land take, we can't excavate, we can't follow the line, we can't follow the mysteries outside. We've got to actually always work within, but we can use geophysical work, we can use other methods to see what's taking place outside. But if we want to go back, I don't know if the RAI sponsors grants, does it? Okay. Another thing that we have that comes up in terms of ritual and ceremonial are these timber enclosures, post circles, And we've got numerous of these throughout Irish prehistory. And we'll see, again, examples of these. This is from Kilmainham in County Meath. And I'll just draw attention to two things. Again, the four-post structure. We mentioned four-post structure earlier on in Maherboy. Another four-post structure here. And again, on our sites, we're continually finding this sort of motif. Four-post structure, timber enclosures, post enclosures. And we're going to see that repeated again through prehistory. And just to finish up in the Neolithic, I thought I'd bring along some Passage Tomb art. Now, interestingly, the Passage Tomb art that we're seeing here none of these sites are from Neolithic contexts. These are all actually found early medieval contexts where the stone has been reused. So, over on the left-hand side, that's the stone from Lismullen. There's a capstone for a souterrain, and it looks like a curbstone that you get outside Newgrange. It's just very comfortable within that. We've also got from other souterrains in County Louth into Tetra and Newtown Balregan, we've got these Passage Tomb art being reused. And again, it's a sense that the past is continually being reused and sites again are being revisited. There's awareness of the past, and we're going to see that repeated right the way through. If we move to the Bronze Age, we find it's a very rich period for us. We've got some tremendous artefacts have come up. I'm just going to point out a couple. Firstly, another connection between Ireland and England is the what you call it, this little top. It's a cap, but it's a gold button cover, and it's from Radley in Berkshire. There's this parallel to it in Radley in Berkshire. Likewise, we've got these razors in the lower left-hand image there from Peafield and Limerick. We've got another one of these stone alignment, or these timber posts alignments from Kerry, and again, it's got a very strong, fixed Bronze Age date. Pottery. I mentioned the pottery in the Neolithic. In the Bronze Age, we've got pottery's ubiquitous. We're getting pottery at virtually all of our sites. Two examples here. We've got from Neurath, incredibly fine urn came from Neurath, and then we've also got a particularly unusual object, which is a face cup, which to my knowledge has no parallels in anywhere in either Britain, Ireland or Europe. And I think that's a unique object and is worthy of a lecture in its own right on its own. Another thing we've found, of course, we've got metalwork coming in here in the Bronze Age, and this is a spearhead from Mullamast in County Kildare. That spearhead was excavated by Rubicon in the Corsair Works, and they went and actually carried out some experimental archaeology to see about recasting it or casting a replica. And that's the image that you see behind, just out of focus. That's actually a replica image that they came up with. And it's something that we've used, again, I've spoken about interpretation, be it through audio guides, through the images that you see. We're also doing interpretation through experimental archaeology, trying to see, can we understand exactly what's going on. Settlement, there's a huge amount of settlement turning up. Again, this is a Ballinabrownie lower. And in this case, we actually were able to, as we did with Maherboy, did work outside the Atlantic to try to get a feel for what is going on. And here you've got quite a comprehensive village of enclosure, of houses and enclosures in there. That's another reconstruction from Digital Archaeology, a German company, again showing this enclosed landscape. And back to Clownstown for a second. This is our Folach Fia, and Folach Fia comes from is reference to hunting sites. So in our legends in Ireland, we're referring to the Folach Fia being referred to as the hunting sites, and as an archaeological monument, they turn up like this. And they were assumed initially that they were related to Iron Age and date. On excavation, they've been revealed to be what are called Bronze Age, and they essentially comprise of a horseshoe-shaped mound with a water-lined trough, a waterproof trough, and hearth, and for heating water. So from Sunna in County Mayo, you've got the actual mound and the trough, and there's the actual trough turned up there. In that case, it's wood-lined. In other case, we've actually found clay-lined troughs. And that would be the typical image of it, Ferguson Island's image of a trough, joints of meat being cooked. Personally, I think the idea of boiling meat when you could roast it, I don't like the idea of it. But other interpretations, partly that at this site we've also found some quite unusual objects can turn up at the site. And for engineers, they loathe Folach Fias because the Folach Fias are so ubiquitous. You find them in every single skim. They say, well, sure, you never get anything interesting from them. Well, actually, in this one from Son of 5, which is literally just beside Son of 4, we found this biconical tin bead, which actually has a parallels, no other parallels in Ireland, but has parallels from Flag Fen, so that there's an object in Flag Fen which looks somewhat similar. Other interpretations from the cooking meat interpretation are that they're sweat houses or saunas, and here you've got Liam Hackett has identified one from Ballyburn Lower, and he's quite simply suggests that the main trough would have been filled with water, it's clay lined, and then surrounded with a structure to allow for a sauna to build up. And we get actual ethnographic versions of these right through history, with sweat houses turning up in much later dates. And then we've got the burnt mound in the background. Another interpretation, again, this interpretation is purely on the basis of the intercutting ditches and pits. So you've got all these pits, which are all contemporary from the dates, are reasonably contemporary, but have been interpreted as being a fulling site for the treatment of fleeces, and for cleaning and treatment of fleeces. There's no actual evidence from the site to suggest that it is what it was, other than the configuration of the ditches. From the site we found a spade is identified here, a little shovel head, and an antler pick as well turned up. So other interpretations that have come across have been brewing, have been butchering, have been leather work, have been for flax, treatment of flax. Numerous interpretations have come up for these site types. So I'll just leave the Bronze Age and move to the Iron Age. Now, when I was in college back in the late 80s, early 90s, the Iron Age was always accompanied by words of elusive, enigmatic, mysterious. And Katrina Becker, in work she's done with Ian Armand and Graham Swindle, in their work they refer to the Iron Age has posed even more basic questions, many of which could hardly be addressed due to the simple lack of data. And that's from a book that they're going to be publishing with us later on in the year. And this is just a distribution map of settlement sites and rural sites. And there are also artefacts as well, but it's quite sparse. Their work, based on the radiocarbon dates, has identified a much richer amount of dates that are firmly tied to the Iron Age. We're contributing approximately 60 to 70% of those dates are coming from road schemes, and you can see there the M3, the N9 and 10, the M17, the M6, and so on. You know, they're actually being picked out in the landscape. So some of those enigmatic and mysterious and elusive, well, I think development-led work can help to address those questions. And what are we seeing when we find the Iron Age? Well, this is actually one of my favourite sites of all, Clune, Katrina Moore's excavations in Longford. It actually could fit, this site, Clune, again deserves a lecture in its own right. It could fit into Neolithic, it could fit into Bronze Age, Iron Age, and even into early medieval. I'm just focusing on artefacts on this, these two features here. This is an Iron Age platform, and this trackway here is a late Bronze Age, early Iron Age feature, and it's actually got dates right the way through. It doesn't cease. There's no clear distinction between Bronze Age dates and Iron Age dates. Material came from it: spearheads, wheels, very unusual mallet, and also the wooden bowl there in the lower right hand corner. I mentioned the fact that pottery was important in prehistory. Well, we saw it in the Neolithic, we saw it in the Bronze Age, in the Iron Age, and even into the early medieval. Pottery has gone from the record. We don't have pottery. For some reason, this society has decided we're not going to use pottery. I don't know why. Perhaps the fact that we've got wooden bowls such as that is the answer. But pottery has gone as for vessels completely. We have at the time interactions in the Iron Age interactions with the rest of Europe and Britain. These are some objects which are the object on the far left is a brooch inspired from a Latin design that was found in a hill fort in Galway. The spearhead below is a Roman inspired spearhead, and then there's a swan neck pin also from a typical Iron Age date that was found in Ireland. So we have got material coming in from overseas, and we've also got people within Ireland making their own material inspired by other material from abroad. Ironworking, we've got all aspects of the ironworking, from our charcoal, from our excavations under bogs to getting the bog ore, from our charcoal production pits, from our smelting sites, from our smithing. Here's a couple of smelting sites, furnaces in a shaft furnace from Grange. And I think what's interesting about shaft furnace means they are working in clay. They're fully aware of the properties of clay. So to actually go from making a shaft furnace or to making a pot. There would be no difficulty whatsoever to do that, but they're choosing not to do it. We've also got in Knockamon just a furnace site which is actually surrounded and has been interpreted as being underneath the structure. Went back to the start, we've talked about settlement. Well, here we've got settlement from Money Law and Lower, Lee McKinstry's work there with Valerie J. Keeley, and it shows a number of R&H houses, all closely dated. You can see there 210 to 240 BC, 370 to 170 BC, 360 50 BC, and it's also identified kilns as well. So we are actually beginning to pick out, and around the country we're beginning to pick out R&H settlements, actual R&H houses. And here we've got, going to our ceremonial side, we've got Ring Ditch. Again, very closely dated, this from Galway, very closely dated, last century BC, first century AD, a ring ditch. And from that ring ditch, there are two ring ditches here in Galway. We got these beautiful glass beads which have parallels with Mayor in Somerset. And we also have this fantastic object. It's about the size of a domino. And actually it's got even a, probably not too dissimilar to a domino with the 5 and 6 there. On all the sides though, it's actually got numbers. It's got it's got incisions on all the sides. So it's a die, and that bone die which has been badly burnt, probably during cremation, that's got parallels in Ireland, England and Scotland. It certainly sits very comfortably with examples from Lough Crew. And then another national monument we found, this is from Lismullen. And remember, I referred to before about the Neolithic stone from Lismullen which turned up in the Souterrain. The Souterrain will be up here. This is our large enclosure, and it's picked out by the people. When that site has been excavated, we had 150 archaeologists working on that site at the time. And then you've got an inner enclosure, and you've also got an avenue, a wooden avenue. Again, that sense of avenues, wooden enclosures, turning up and being repeated in quite different cultural contexts, but we're seeing it again throughout prehistory. This one has an alignment on the stars, on the Pleiades, on the Pleiades constellation there. That avenue is actually lined on the constellation. So now move to the early medieval period. Again, when I was in college, the early medieval period, we understood the early medieval period absolutely. Settlement was in ring forts or cashels. So the ring forts are up there, the raths. Your cashels, a stone built ring fort, or crannogs for the wealthy. And then if there was religious, they had ecclesiastical settlements which sometimes ended up becoming proto-towns. That was an accepted model. In the 90s, we suddenly started discovering, not just on road schemes, but on a lot of schemes, other type of settlements came up. And these became known as Fertha, or cemetery settlements. And just picked up a few. There's one that was found in 2003 in Johnstown. And you should be able to see here this the red circle there. That's delineating a mound, the remains of a mound. The excavator Linda Clark noted, and at the centre of that was a charnel pit with the remains of, I think it was about 20-30 individuals, disarticulated remains, partially burnt, and all come back with a very, very tight R&H date. Now that site started off burial there, then burial moved to this quadrant here from throughout the medieval period. So right away through the early medieval period into the late medieval period, and burial continued on right over here when there was actually in the 17th, 18th, 19th and up to 20th century when there were actual infants buried there as part of a children's burial ground. It's a phenomenon in Ireland for children who died before baptism. They would be buried in, they could be buried in churchyards, but they could be buried in sacred spaces by the community. And here we have that. And I actually remember when that scheme was being done, I went and I spoke to the grandmother of the landowner, and she told me about how her friend's sister was actually buried there. So you've got this sense within the landscape of, like I call it, stepping stones from the Iron Age to the modern period, not the early modern period, to the modern period, going right the way through. Interesting folk memory, and we're seeing that pattern repeated again and again around Ireland. More cemetery settlements turning up here, this from Carrickeel and Rubicon excavating Galway. And actually, by the way, this one here in the centre, that was just finished up excavation about 2 months ago. So we're still working on sites like these right at the moment, and that came from a scheme about a skin which is about 300 or 400 metres in length. This is what they look like, and this is what their interpretive look like. This is by the interpreter by Teach Tyler, and you can see banked enclosure, settlement and fields, and then delineating from the surrounding landscape. Material, getting a wide range of material, pins, brooches, and of course burials. One of the moves shifts focus slightly now to the ecclesiastical side. So we've looked at sort of settlement, or cemetery settlements. We're going to look at the ecclesiastical side on just one object here. And this is Clonfad in County Westmeath, and on the site we found an abundance of fragments, of metalworking fragments, tons of it, literally tons of metalworking fragments and slag and so on. We also found these strange shrouds, and nobody's quite sure what they were until someone noticed this one here, which had the 2 holes there and the line there, and that was interpreted as being a shroud for a bell, for a metal object, for a bell which we folded over. You'd have your rivets there. You'd then be from following lipid analysis, they would have been what you call wrapped in a hessian soaked with brazing chemicals, fired. Once it was fired, you get that characteristic, the shroud, fragments of the shroud, and then you get the actual bell at the end. And the purpose for doing that was to actually enrich and enhance the tonal qualities of the bell. So it comes across, and rather than having quite a flat sound when you get from an iron bell, that gives you a much richer, much deeper sound. Unfortunately, we have a replica of it. This is a project we did with National Museum of Wales, GeoArc and VJK, Limited. I was going to bring it along with me, but I thought that it might be difficult to explain to customs that it was an object, but it wasn't an object. It's a superb thing. It's a superb object, and it's an interesting way of doing work. Paul Stevens, the director, has interpreted the site as being actually a bell manufactory. He feels that the amount of bell fragments that he got were too much for one site alone. You don't need that many bells on one site. So he would actually liken it to almost like a scriptorium, but have it for bell manufacturing. And of course, Clonfad happens to be in the centre of the country, and those are the sites which have bells all around it. And interestingly, we've got references in the annals of the Four Masters, and also in the life of St. Colman, who's the founding saint, that the hereditary stewards of this particular monastery were blacksmiths. So, another ecclesiastical site that I'm going to refer to before we leave the early medieval period is Cobegley Mill. At this mill site, which is just in County Roscommon, we had a road going right way through the bottom of the valley, and the churchyard was at the top. We came across this very fine structure. It's the undercroft of a mill. You can see there the sluice going down, so the water would have been here, sluice would have come down here and directed in here. And what I want to draw your attention to is the actual wheel hub here. This is the wheel hub, and notice that just in the centre there. Originally we thought that the water would have come onto that straight, come out of the wheel, the sluice, and come straight at it. But examining it, realised that probably not, and probably what we were doing was the water is actually going onto the dome here, onto the bell shape here. And as the water hit the bell, it then meant increase the amount of force that went onto the paddles that was going round. And we found multiple different types of paddles on the site. So it wasn't all one type of paddle. It meant that they could actually control the speed of the stone for grinding the corn here. So by changing the paddle types. They could take them out and put them in as required. Interesting if we could get an experiment, try to do that with an experimental archaeology on that. Now, move again to the medieval period. And for us, the medieval period, we take it from the time of the Anglo-Norman colonisation, following laudability. Here we found these sites, these are moated sites. And I'm going to talk about these sites because they are sites which came in with the Anglo-Normans. And they date to the sort of 13th, 14th century. The types that we have, they're rural farmsteads, quite different to the previous Irish farmsteads, which are circular or suboval. And you've got your houses, rectangular houses, bars, etc. in them. Material that you're getting pottery, and we're getting extensive quantities of pottery. We're also getting imported pottery. Here we're getting Santonge, there's a corkware, and there's also ham green bee ware. So pottery's coming into the record. Another site from Coolamurray, where we've got a the remains of Grace Fagan, the director, has interpreted this as being a drawbridge, and she's identified on the site, again, the material came from it, pottery, dividers, and also very well, finely made quern stones. Interestingly, when we think about the people who actually lived in the site, Mark Gardner and Ty Keefe would have considered this area, and Kieran Connor would have considered this area to be the equivalent of the immigrants who came over originally with the Anglo-Norman colonisation, or else their descendants. So that you've got people coming over and there'd be free tenants, so they'd be prosperous, and they would liken them to the artisans in the urban areas, that you've actually got people who are very wealthy, but they're wealthy within their class. Another site we've got from the medieval period is Ballyhanna. This is a site we excavated up in Donegal, and it's a churchyard which literally was lost. It's across the road from the house. The people had no notion that it was there. We found several hundred burials there. When we analysed those burials, they provided and it was just done. There was a research project with Queen's University Belfast, IT Sligo, Donegal County Council, and ourselves. When we analysed the burials, there's a lot of ancient DNA work done on them, and that ancient DNA research fed into a project in the University of Wisconsin, which was which is studying cystic fibrosis. Now, Ireland has one of the highest rates of cystic fibrosis in Western Europe, and that cystic fibrosis has traditionally been thought to always be within the population in Ireland. It has always been there. The Ballyhanna work allowed us to actually go in there and look at the various alleles, the genetic markers, and identify that actually this population had a lower incidence of cystic fibrosis than the modern population, and therefore it actually supports the hypothesis that cystic fibrosis, the genetic marker for cystic fibrosis, came in the 17th century when there was a tuberculosis plague. There was an outbreak of tuberculosis. So it shows how the kind of work that can be done can contribute not just to our understanding in archaeological terms, but also our medical understanding. There's other objects there: small spearhead, small arrowhead, cross-shaped pottery, and a little bell there. Moving to Dublin and moving to one of our light rail projects. Here we can't do our big trenches as we do in advance. We have to use the opportunities afforded by enabling works. And this is Trinity College Dublin, immediately outside Trinity College Dublin, very historic part of the city. And actually, it's interesting enough, Trinity College was endowed originally by Queen Elizabeth, so Queen Elizabeth I. In here, or immediately outside, you've got a part of the city which has got Viking, it's got there's a monastery, and it's also got Tudor activity all taking place in one area. When these burials came up in the work, no one's quite sure where they were going to date it. They were eventually dated to the Tudor period, and they were sent to the Face Lab in Liverpool, John Moore University, and based on typical Irish colouring, the specialists there were able to reproduce him. Also based on the skeletal evidence, they would say that he was from a lower class, he was hardworking, had lived an active life, manual labour. So therefore, rather than putting him into Tudor finery, they put him into a much more simpler cloth. His hairstyle and beard are inspired by Lucas de Here's images of 16th century, 16th century people, Irish people. So interesting one. So now we're going to move again rapidly in time to the 17th century, and here I'm going to focus in on just a couple of days, about a month in total. Just like Britain, and when you had the Civil War taking place here in Ireland, there was a civil war. There's a civil disturbance, so to speak. There's a rebellion, and there's a Confederacy of Kilkenny was established in 1641, and through the 1640s, the armies actually exchanged sides. So you had alliances formed and reformed in different ways and different permutations. But at the time, 1642. This is from a map from the 1650s. You had Dublin town, city here, Dalkey here, and the Dublin Mountains down here. And this area was described, shall I say, in the Dublin Mountain and the mountains to the south, in Wicklow, the Dublin Mountains, the Wicklow Mountains. That was areas held by the Irish, by Confederates, and had traditionally been held by the Irish. And to the north, you had areas of land which had been held by the English settlers. And you had a lot of conflict. This is a border zone. In 1640s, there was an ambush in February 12th, I should say. There was an ambush and massacre here, depending on your point of view, in Dean's Grange, when Confederate forces were beaten by government forces. They all retreated, moved. They then fortified various castles in that area, in that contested area, including one at Carrick Mines. Okay. The government forces were concerned that they were actually now occupying positions, because they're occupying positions in this shall I say, contested territory, and they said that they were going in there. They were concerned that they could hinder our markets and to cut off as such as we should send abroad, and that's from the actual government papers at the time. So they decided to march under Simon Harcourt on the March 24th. They decided to march a large force of 800 flintlocks, soldiers, flintlocks, down to Carrick Mines to lay siege to it. And they described the defenders began to give reproachful signs to Harcourt's men from the top of the castle. I'm not sure what a reproachful sign is, but we can kind of imagine that it's not particularly welcoming. And again, that's from Borlasse, that was from 1680, so that's a historical account of it, 40 years after the event. Owen gives a contemporary account of it. A fire was lit on the battlement of the castle. And when he says the fire was lit on the battlement of the castle, he also goes on to say that there was a responding fire from the mountains. So you can imagine these are the mountains here. And actually the landscape here is, that illustration doesn't do it justice, that it's quite a rough, you've got high ground to the south, and the area isn't flat, it's quite rough. There's a lot of interlocking hills there. Not an easy area to defend or to control. Apparently the soldiers in Carrick Mines tried to break out. They were unable to break out. And in the course of the siege, which is only lasting day, we're only talking about Sunday, the March 24th, Simon Harcourt is killed, and a number of his soldiers are killed, and then that motivates his troops, who fall on with exceeding great fierceness to the castle, and with axes break open the gate. And that's from the Ormond manuscript, again government side. Now we're going to get into it. 200 odd men, women and children were killed, contemporary account from Owen. 300 persons described dead from Ormond. The opposition say, but 2 defenders escaped. But that hundreds of Harcourt's troops were killed in the failed assault. So, let's see what archaeology can say. And then it goes on to say, blew up the castle with powder as a mark of terror to the rebels. And again, that's what the government side is saying. So we've got an event taking place in 1640s for multiple points of view. And we then go on in the 1650s, during the Down Survey, when they're actually documenting, and Sir William Petty is documenting all the lands in Ireland that are going to be confiscated. And it's an amazing project that he did. They say they stands only the walls of a fair stone house which are in Carrick Main, or on Carrick Main. So that's a contemporary account of what happened 10 years afterwards, what we're seeing in Carrick Main. So the blowing up, the sundering of the walls, that's probably correct. Now, where does this fit in with us? Well, we're building a motorway in the early 2000s, started in the late 90s, and it's going through this area. We know that there's a record of a castle in Carrick Mines, but nobody actually knows what kind of castle it is, either before or indeed since. And you can just see on the left-hand image all the area that's actually been excavated. If we go on, the extent of the castle, we know this is a multi-period site. Again, I keep talking about multi-period sites. We've got prehistoric activity here, we've got early medieval activity, we've got medieval activity. We've also got this upstanding, it ends up as just a farmyard at the end. This is the only part of that structure that is surviving. So we've got a farmyard that you can see in previous photographs, and you've got this wall. That's Carrick Mines Castle. We also know that there's very, very significant ditches, and you can see these fosses here. Those are absolutely massive fosses. So the farmyard's in here, and then these are ditches, just to give you a sense of scale. These are massive ditches. We don't actually know what Carrick Mines was. We don't know if it was a command and control centre or whether it was a refuge. It will certainly act as a refuge, which would allow people to retreat in, but it could equally have been a place to launch attacks from through its life. But let's return to the massacre. And in total, we found 18 burials in 2 pits. And we found a number of coins, all dated, either contemporary or earlier. We found muskets. We found a small number of musket balls, including that one impacted musket ball, and we found firing mechanisms from various guns. But does that represent 300 casualties? It's hard to say. And this is actually one of the problems that we have with the work that we do. There's a limitation. We can only excavate what we're impacting upon. We can't excavate everything, and we can't follow everything. So here is the road as built. That's where the farmyard is. The burials would have been found in this area here, and you'd have had the big, shall we say, fosses would have been down here. So again, it's one of the limitations. We can't actually tell we can't answer the story as to what's happening there, and it's a common feature. So we'll just leave the post-medieval period and we'll head on now into the early modern period. And during the early modern period, we're going back to Dublin City, and this is a map from the 18th century. The city is growing, it's expanding. The area we're interested in is sitting there up the top, just under the cartouche, and it's at the point in the middle of the 18th century. It's fields, and it's also got houses along the side. 50 years later, the landscape has radically changed. In 1796, we get that aqueduct you can see, and actually just as you see those hills in the distance, they're the Dublin Wicklow Mountains. So Carrick Mines would actually been about here, so we're in that landscape, so you've got these big prominences behind you. The Foster's Aqueduct there is built. We've got a canal coming down in. This is linking to Raw Canal, and to the south of that we've got the markets in Smithfield. So bringing material in from outside the city in would come in through the canal. We've also got in the course of the early part of the 19th century, we've got the construction of institutional aspects of Dublin. We've got Richmond Penitentiary built there, and fun enough, there's models all over Ireland similar to this in terms of ground plan. We've got Queen's Inns, the Law Library. We've also got the Workhouse. Various other government institutions are being built. For the next exercise, what I want you to do is focus in on this field here, and particularly this wall. I'll explain why. In the 1830s, cholera arrives in the city. We get a cholera epidemic. 30,000 people die in Ireland in total. About 30,000 are recorded in total in 1832. In Dublin, there's about 10,000 people are actually infected, and 6,000 die. They're buried in a cholera hospital, they're treated originally in a cholera hospital. The graveyard that's associated with a cholera hospital in Bully's Acre is overflows, can no longer handle it, so they press into service the Richmond Penitentiary, and that becomes a cholera hospital to accept the overflow of patients, so to speak. The casualties are buried in this area here, in this field here, and there are about 3,000 or so buried in here. So we've got 2 burial grounds essentially. When our works are going along for Lewis Cross City, we're excavating along that wall I described earlier on, and we come across 30 or 40 burials all along that wall, which are quite clearly associated with the cholera burial ground. However, we're going to flip back to the history of the area here. We've got that field still there. That's the one I'm talking about. The harbour, this is from the 1840s. The harbour is still there, and we have what's called the Broadstone Terminal. 20 years later, at this time, the harbours, the ports in the 1840s are sold to the railway. The canals, which have come into existence in the late 18th century or 19th century, have only had a lifespan of less than 30 years. And now they're being sold to the Middle and Great Railway. Middle and Great Western Railway has to keep it open for a number of years. They put in a lovely pneumatic bridge. But then in the 1870s, they need to expand. The harbour is completely infilled. The canal's infilled as well, and they expanded, and then they put in this new engine shed, turning circle, and you can see that wall which I described earlier on. That's still there, and there's another wall put into one side. And this is what happened to those bodies. They basically cut a series of very long trenches along the length of those walls, and they just piled in the bodies. There's no care, there's no attention. It was just dig them up, dump them in. And we found over 1,800 skulls. Funnily enough, we didn't actually find a similar number of mandibles, and we feel the mandibles were dropped away or fell away, were discarded. But they were just stuffed in there, and stuffed is the only word you can use. To my mind, it's actually absolutely appalling. It is of the time, of course. We found a grave slab there, and there's great excitement by Mark Moran, who actually took many of these photographs, who's the excavation director. Found it. We thought that it would be revealing about the whole lot, but it's poignant for one person. Here lies the earthly remains of Anthony Dunleavy, who died 20th of July 1832. This small tribute of affection is erected to his memory by his beloved wife, Jane Dunleavy. And of course, beloved wife would never expected that her husband would be dumped unceremoniously into a pit like that. And then there's the photograph. So that's the lane where we're working in. This is the the grave cuts from the 1832, which are quite respectfully done. And then these are the long trenches, which are anything but respectful in the way that they treat the dead. Two artifacts. We found quite a few artifacts here, but I just thought I'd throw two. One button from the jacket or coat of a Midland Great Western Rail worker, and also another bone die, which turned up many years after our original one. Postscript to this is that up until recently, this was actually a back street lane for gardens. So those cottages all had their little allotments in here, and were growing their potatoes and their vegetables were growing in here. They also despite the desire for the railway to take over and do all the damage in the 1870s, the railway itself went out of existence in the 1930s. So, from a person speaking in a transport agency, this is quite a salutary tale, a cautionary tale, I should say. So, that brings us to the end of our whistle-stop tour-ish, satellite tour of art, archaeology and prehistory from our perspective. I suppose, going back to this map, 2,500 and counting, because like even today there are archaeologists working on these schemes at the moment. They're working in Lewis Cross City, they're working on those various areas around the country. And what we're seeing is this has been a massive undertaking in the past 20 years, and a massive amount of collaboration between a lot of different people from the individual archaeologists, individual excavators. And you can imagine that when you look at those yellow circles, they represent an archaeologist in every single field across the island, almost from Dublin to Galway, going in a radio pattern. That there are people in there looking, searching, whose sole job is to find archaeology, and whose sole job is there to bring the archaeology out, to research, to carry out their own research, to carry out their own exploration, to test out their own ideas. We've then got countless specialists working on it. I've tipped off a number of universities who we've got research projects with, going along the way, all building up a collective knowledge, baseline knowledge, so that anybody coming back to look at Irish archaeology in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I would expect one their starting point is going to be the material that's coming from our schemes, because it creates this baseline data that I think some parallel in Ireland. And certainly I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done, and also the work that's been done by all the people there. With that, I'll just like thank you. If you've got any questions, I'll take those. I'll just throw in at the end just a reference, a couple of things. We've got over 30 books have been published to date. We've got 34 books published. We have another 10 currently for production next 3 years, next 4 years we've got another 10, and we've got another 20 on top of that to be published down the line. So we're keeping our publication going. We've got a project with the Digital Repository of Ireland, and in May 2017 we're going to be launching it with 1,500 reports. Our grey literature reports will be available online, our audio guides, our YouTube clips, and our papers from our monographs. We've got our audio guides, and we've got a YouTube channel there as well. And take my email address, contact me if there's anything you want in particular. So, thank you.